May is typically the peak of the tornado season across the United States. Usually during the months of April and May and even early June, you just see the ingredients coming together for tornadic activity. What happens is you still kind of got a little bit of a wintertime light jet stream kind of mixed with some of the summertime heat and humidity, and the two overlap each other for a couple of months or a couple of weeks during this time of the year. And that's why the peak of the tornado season happens right now here. So we're entering the peak of it now. And typically speaking, in at least our part of the country, usually somewhere mid to late May, we see a pretty good blast or a pretty good active period of severe weather. And then oftentimes it shifts out of the way here and we kind of open the door for summer to come on in. But at least for right now, in the short term, nothing like that is taking place here. If you we have to kind of look upstairs here, and at least into Wednesday, and we got a storm system. You can see the spin here, kind of located into this area. But as it tries to move east, it's going to kind of get stuck over here, and then that's going to mean winds are going to be out of the north. And offshore flow, north flow of air behind that keeps the moisture down in the Gulf of Mexico and keeps it from coming in our direction. In fact, we can put this in motion for you here. There's Thursday into Friday, and you can see the big spin there and how it just kind of drifts a little bit to the east. Here we are on Saturday. We got north winds on the back side of that here. And again, this is offshore flow, so that means no moisture getting caught up from the Gulf of Mexico. And without that moisture, you can't get storms. So we're looking good into the weekend, latter part of this week. Finally, a time to dry across a good part of the waterlogged south. We're talking about Oklahoma, Texas, over in Louisiana, Mississippi, those areas, Arkansas. So that's good news. But there's some indications that we're going to try to change the pattern up a bit. At least initially, though, again, you still see this large area of low pressure, and you don't have a lot of moisture to work with yet, all right? And here comes a dip in the jet stream, a piece of energy over this way. To get severe weather, typically speaking, you got to have a pretty good jet stream out here coming in from the southwest, and then you kind of have a bit of what we call a ridge of high pressure over here, and that funnels the moisture northward. But right now, we don't see that. This would be about Tuesday of next week. But as we get into the middle and latter parts of next week, that offshore flow, that upper level low we were talking about, gets replaced by one of those high pressure systems. You can see the clockwise circulation. So that helps to bring the moisture northward. And at the same time, we got jet stream energy starting to come into play, kind of overlapping that. Now, at least looking at this, that doesn't scream major severe weather, not yet, but this type of a flow pattern this time of year, once you get into this the middle and latter part of May, it don't take much. All you got to have is a little bit of flow up and over the dry line. That mixed with increasing levels of humidity and moisture and temperatures leads to a pretty unstable atmosphere. So all you got to have is a little flow over the dry line, and then boom, you get severe weather here. But what we have to keep an eye on will be what looks like a pretty good dip in the jet stream and a repeated flow kind of out of the west and southwest. And that could favor, mid to late next week and maybe even beyond, periods of active severe weather across the traditional tornado alley. Too early to get super specific with it and talking about when that would happen and the exact days and what kind of severe weather it might be and the exact locations. But we just know the signals are there for parts of the region here to kind of get maybe a little more active here. So if we take a look at between now and the weekend, again, with that offshore flow, you just don't get moisture. Now, you begin to see some signatures of that on Tuesday. I don't think you see a lot because I still don't think we have the moisture in place for that. And then beyond that time frame, though, you're starting to see some of these thunderstorm potentials increase over in this area. But, of course, everything depends upon locations of these storm systems. How strong will that ridge of high pressure be? What's the exact location? Where's the dry line at? And what will the cap look like? And oftentimes in these situations down at least this far to the south, we wind up with the cap and we don't get as many storms. We've had a lot of active weather as of late. A lot of these storm systems have been waterlogged, but this type of a pattern may not be quite as wet, but it would feature more in the way of those supercell type storms that could feature bigger severe weather events. And this would be right on schedule when you're supposed to see it. So we'll see if it all lines up here. Hopefully not. We certainly need to dry out. We certainly don't want the severe weather, but it is that time of the year and we just have to keep an eye on it. Bottom line is I'll be watching it and keeping an eye on this in the days to come. Remember to have a legitimate, trusted source for getting your weather information, not those guys out there on social media that likes to play them up. Not everybody on social media is horrible. There's some pretty decent ones out there, but a lot of them are really bad. So just be careful about who you trust. All right, I'll be keeping an eye on this in the days to come. And remember to like and follow all of my social media pages. And my name is Ken Johnson, First Alert 6 Chief Meteorologist at News Channel 6 in Wichita Falls.